It's time for Market Explainer, your number one business news podcast. Hosted by Danny and the big man. And it starts right now.
Netflix. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the internet investing community, the Wall Street Bets universe, as I call it, is because the Wall Street Bet story last year spawned, I don't know if it spawned, but it popularized internet investors and internet investors thinking
100%.
and meme accounts of the like liquidity, YOLO options, all these people that I follow. And there's something within that community that's called inverse Cramer. And that's if Jim Cramer of CNBC says to invest in something, short it, because he's an idiot. And he's wrong about everything all the time. So there's a tweet
which is not true, but that is what you're saying is accurate in that that's where that community comes from.
Correct. So he, in January of this month, told people to buy Netflix. Netflix, oops-a-daisy. Didn't it drop 20 points yesterday?
Well, look, yes, it did. It dropped 26 points this week, but and has lost since the beginning of the year half of its value, right? Half of its value entirely. But this is actually an interesting. You and I have talked about several times on here that stocks don't always make sense, and here's what I don't understand. Okay, the story that Danny's bringing up is for the first time in 11 years, Netflix. Right. For the first quarter of this year has lost subscribers, right?
200,000.
Okay, but there's a whole lot going on in the world, including a war. They took an entire country and no longer giving them the ability to access Netflix, right? So in a quarter where they were forecasted to grow by about 2 million subscribers, they shrank by 200,000 subscribers, which really is a negative of over 2 million subscribers, right?
You're expecting to grow, so it's really like you lost 2.2.
But this is why the part where stocks don't always make sense to me is, okay, I get it. That one particular statistic sounds bad. However, when you look at it, they still made money because they increased their monthly rate, right, and stuff like that. Right. So even though they lost subscribers, they still made money. So if a company still makes money, who cares if they lost subscribers?
Right. So this is the thing that helped me understand what I always repeat on the show, which is the first principle of market economics is that value is subjective. Because that's the only way for me to square the circle that a company that is profitable lost 26 points in a week. Its stock went down 26% and lost half of its share value from the beginning of the year, even though it's still profitable. And on the
not only profitable, but grew by 10% year over year. This same quarter last year, they made 10% more money, an extra $8 billion this first quarter, and lost half of its value. That makes no sense economically at all.
And that's why, listen, there's one thing that Dave Ramsey says that is correct. He's not right about everything, but he's right about a few things. And the first one is money is emotional, right? And so if you take those two ideas and really, really let them soak in, it's really hard that's why I'm a free market economics guy, is because people make emotional choices with their money. And I, as an individual who tends towards things like statistics, math, and reason and logic, don't want to be subject to the emotional whims of people when it comes to money. I don't want to have to live with the consequences of someone else being emotional with their money. They have to live with the consequences. Now, my own life, Big Man and I were just talking about this before. My family is going, they're selling a house and they're being emotional about it. Right. And I'm trying to be logical, which is like, hey, we're doing great. But they set an expectation. They didn't meet that expectation. They beat the market. They beat the market by like 15% or 20%.
Right.
And they're still
Right.
like, that's not enough. And I go, listen, I'm all
It's
about
never
greed.
enough.
I am all about greed. Okay. But we've done well. So that's where the reason I keep saying this is for people like us who are business people who try to look at the world through a logical lens with by you and judging things based on the facts, we're not the only people. There are other people,
No.
and
Yeah.
those other people are emotional, and we have to contend with, hey, I might be a little spectrumy when it comes to money, but they're being emotional about it. I'm going, hey, listen, your Louis Vuitton bag, it's worth $28. Like that's
Right. Like that's the materials that are put in it.
like
That's the yeah.
we'll even use a better example. Uh Insulin. If you factor in all of the costs, including the
The bottle.
not just the bottle, all of the research, all of the
Hmm.
doctors, everything. At $8 a bottle, they're making the profits are astronomical,
Yeah, it's
right?
pennies to make. It's pennies,
Yes.
literally pennies. Less than $1 for every vial, and that includes the
And then you
bottle, the cap, the
right.
everything.
It's and then you say, okay, like, hey, how like what percentage? And here's the other crazy part: you go to other countries, go to Mexico, you go to other places,
Hmm.
you can buy the insulin made in this country for nothing. It
Right.
feels free. Because I know people right now who jumped the border into old Mexico to buy their so, but for whatever reason, it's emotional and there's insurance companies, so they're able to charge more, right?
Hmm.
So when it comes to this situation, Netflix is expecting to lose more customers, which is nobody expects growth to be perpetual, right?
Well, I think, but that's not true. That's what we just said in motion. I think people do. I have always had this question when it came to anything that relies on, big companies like that. Look, there are only so many people in the world, right? There are only so many people in the world with internet access, right? And so there are only so many people that Netflix can sign up to have access to their thing. I've asked this question about cell phone carriers for 20 years. There are only
Right,
so many people that have cell phones,
right,
and they just shuffle them back and forth in the American economy. Everybody has a cell phone in today's world. They're not signing up new people. They're just
right,
sharing them amongst their people, so they
right,
can't grow anymore. So it should not be about growth. It should be about profits. Which one of
right.
these companies
Is
is
the
doing
most
is
profitable,
Verizon making the most profit because they're
right?
right doing the right decisions, making the right money, keeping up with technology, whatever it is. But that's not, again, to me this doesn't make sense because I am that logical guy. If you
Right.
say, again, take Joe Bob Company, and this year they made $8 billion more this quarter than they did last year, that's a company I want to invest in. Now, I wouldn't invest in Netflix because, again, I don't think it's a sustainable model. They're already talking about, in this article, they're already talking about trying to get people on board with a advertising like the Hulu, right? Where you get a
I'm
less
out.
expensive model,
I'm
right?
already out. I'm
Well, but
out.
they go, okay, for $8, will you get access to Netflix, but it's going to have ads because we're
Yeah,
going to
but
charge people for ads.
how many people are out there? And I think this is, I'm going to throw out a number. It's 4% of Netflix's current subscribers will go, oh, instead of paying 21, I'll pay 8 with ads, right? They'll get
Hmm.
no new subscriber growth and they'll lose money by doing that, is what I think.
Well, I mean, look, I was unaware that look, and they're going to get better at things like look. One of the biggest things hurting Netflix, we all know, is account sharing, right?
Yeah. They're,
Like
they're going to get rid of that.
yeah, well, and they're going to find out a way, right? But it's
Right.
difficult. It's not as easy as you think. Well, okay, well, if the primary account is at 101 Bebop Drive, then
Right.
any other account shouldn't work. Well, people go on vacation and they access their
Right.
Netflix and they travel for work or they whatever.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not
Right.
as just as simple as a location, right?
I have
It's much more difficult than that.
I have my personal Netflix for my usage, by the way, logged into 6 devices, right?
Right.
A cell phone, another cell phone, a
A tablet.
laptop, a tablet. a couple of televisions, and that's just for my use,
Right.
right? So, and then what do? If you have a household, and you go, well, husband and wife, they got to have a separate account. That's stupid. I doubt that that will work.
Well, look, they have identified, according to this article, they've identified at least 100 million households using Netflix that through shared accounts. At least
Okay,
100 million worldwide,
right.
and only 30 million of those are United States and Canada. So there's 70 million
Out
households
of the
around the
country.
world. But when you look at it the other way and go, look, there are literally billions of households out there, and I'm trying to find the particular number, and maybe I didn't write it down. But anyway, the point is there are, I think it was close to a billion households around the world that
Right,
have access to what we consider broadband internet
right,
access
right,
that don't have Netflix.
right,
So if there's still a billion households out there, and look, that number grows every day, right? With
right,
countries and technology and internet access getting more and more,
right. But
there's
part of
still a
that
lot of
is
growth out there.
right, and
Ability.
it's still part of it is if Netflix doesn't have content in their native language, right? Already that's out, right? So if you don't have so if you have a country like Singapore where there's three or four languages, and you might have content for some of the Hindi speaking people, you might have some
Right.
content for the Cantonese speaking people, whatever. But you don't have anything in Singaporean. Yeah, like
But they're getting better about that. I
they
mean, you
are,
can look at
they
our
are
content because of what happened during obviously the pandy and stuff like that. There's
right,
a lot of shows, movies, and stuff like that that came out on Netflix recently when
right,
our Hollywood was shut down. Other
correct,
countries were still recording, and
yes,
it's a lot of dubbed over content, right, into
right,
English.
right.
Squid
Not very good,
Games,
by the way.
right?
What's
Squid
that?
Games
Yeah, I don't
was
really.
dubbed over, but
People
they
keep
did a
talking
really
about
good
it.
job
Yeah,
of Squid Games in
right.
the dub, right? The
Okay,
voice actors of the English, they did a very good job because
okay.
I was one of those in 10 years ago that was like, all right, if it's dubbed, I'm not watching it. It's weird to me. They don't
Right.
do a very good job of
I'll
expressing
watch
themselves.
subtitles. I can read subtitles anyway.
Absolutely. If it's an
Uh,
action movie, like a great like Bruce Lee esque
Yeah,
movie,
yeah,
like Ip Man, IP Man, right? Ip
yeah,
Man are all those Ip Man because it's
yeah.
action. The 90% of the film's action. I'm only
Right,
reading subtitles for 10 or 20% of the movie. I'm
right.
fine with that. I am not watching subtitles for some long drama French film. Not doing it,
Yeah.
right?
Intellectual Property Man was a action film. I thought it was about an attorney who
No,
just was like, okay,
no, you didn't. Ip Man
okay,
was Bruce Lee's sensei. Ip
oh,
Man
okay,
taught
oh,
Bruce Lee's form of karate. He's the one that
right,
created was Ip Man,
oh,
and it's four different movies now. I think they made the fourth and final movie about how he came up the ranks, how he
okay,
developed this new type of martial art, and
okay.
that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
you look like the type of guy who's into martial arts movies, aren't you?
Hey, I was a big fan of Bruce Lee as a kid, man. Who wasn't? Come on.
Before my time, I'm a
Yeah,
Jackie Chan
that is
guy.
true.
Okay,
Hey, Jackie Chan, all of the stuff Jackie Chan learned was from, I mean, Bruce
yeah,
Lee led Jackie,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, but back to the Netflix. Look, they are investing. Last year, I think it was streaming services last year spent $50 billion on new content last year, trying to keep people on their platform.
Right,
Because remember, just like cell phones in this case, you not only have to attract new customers, you have to keep the ones you have.
correct.
And as you and I have already said on here, like I'm an idiot paying for every app plus cable.
Right,
Not most people aren't like that, right?
right,
I resisted for like the first years before it was Paramount Plus. It was CBS All Access, right?
right.
And that was where the Star Trek. I know Danny loves it when I talk about Star Trek and nerdy
I go
sci-fi
for
stuff.
it. Go for it.
But CBS All Access bought the rights to Star Trek, and they started the new series, Star Trek Discovery, and then
Yeah,
eventually Picard, where they brought Jean-Luc Picard back, right?
uh,
But it's only available on what is now Paramount Plus, right?
right,
So I had to, even though I didn't want yet another app that I was purchasing, I
right,
had to purchase it if I wanted access to the new Star Trek content,
right.
right?
What is I want to figure out where this there's a new Saved by the Bell. Is the new woke Saved
Isn't
by the
that on
Bell?
Apple? I think it's on Apple.
No, it's not Apple. there's another. There's not. It's not Paramount Plus. It's the other one, and now I forget. I always forget which one it is.
But that's how they hook you in. If
Yeah.
they have to, they not only can hook you in, they also then maintain you, right? Because now I have to, if I want to continue to get the next season of Picard, the next season of
Right.
Star Trek Discovery, they actually have another Star Trek one coming out this fall. If you
Right.
want to continue to have access to that, they're the only place you can get it. You
Okay.
just have to keep it.
It's on Peacock. Ah.
Peacock, yes. Peacock is,
I can't do it.
and a lot of the wrestling. If you're a big fan of wrestling, which I was as a kid, but not as an adult, wrestling,
Uh,
Peacock is it. Like Vince
let me tell you
McMahon,
something.
Peacock.
I love you, and I'm so glad to hear that you're not into wrestling as an adult. Okay, because I don't know if this relationship could move forward if that was the
Hey,
case.
a lot of people are though. A lot of
Yeah,
people are, right?
and I
So
guess
Netflix has to spend money to retain customers and gather new customers.
right, and they have to spend money. So I'm starting to wonder if we're reaching a point where there's so many streaming services that there's either going to be fault like Peacock and Paramount
Hmm.
Plus. At some point in time, I think we're going to see more mergers because there's just no other way, right?
Well, or they just die. Like every year, there are several viewing apps out
Right,
there, Acorn TV, stuff like this, that create themselves, build out a library, and then die because they just can't get enough subscribers. They
right,
just can't get enough people to tune in to sell enough money to maintain the servers,
right,
right,
right.
and that
Fair
kind of
enough.
stuff. So it either they'll merger if they're big enough or they'll die. I think the bigger problem for places like Netflix, and we hinted on this earlier, Netflix, Hulu Plus, Amazon Prime, Peacock, right, Paramount Plus, is the next generation, Generation Z, right, and even the tail end of millennials and Generation
Right.
Z. Generation Z is not that 23-year-old Generation Z
Yeah.
isn't even sitting around watching Netflix. They're
No, they're
watching
not.
YouTube. They're watching YouTube Shorts. They're
And
accessing it
TikTok.
through a smart TV,
Right.
right? They're accessing it, like you said, TikTok or whatever.
Yeah.
They're watching new, vibrant content that's created daily and put
Right.
out there.
Right.
And they're watching YouTube. They're watching
But
TikTok.
they're also watching Euphoria. Okay. I I I don't
No,
get it.
no. Yes, some of them are watching Euphoria on their parents' accounts, but
Yes.
they're not watching Euphoria. They're not going out and signing up for a TV service to watch Euphoria. They're playing
Yeah.
video games. Video games to me is the
Right.
number one scariest thing to any form of media. Because Gen Z, the alpha generation that's coming after Gen Z, they are
Yeah.
spending more times playing video games than they do watching TV at all, than they do watching any subscriber service at all,
Right.
including YouTube. The alpha generation, they are playing more video games, time spent, than they
Yeah.
do on YouTube.
Maybe it's a good thing on some level. Like at least they're active.
I, I don't know about that part of it. All I know is that
Right.
has to be scary for a company like YouTube that
Oh,
obviously on top right now, right? We just
right.
talked about Kmart last week about how it was an innovator of its time,
Of
but
course,
then
yeah.
died. If the generation that's coming up behind Gen Z, the alpha generation, which are in their early teens right now, right? 10 years from now, if they're not watching YouTube at all,
Yeah. What
if they're
happens?
not, and then Gen Z, the younger Gen Zers, right, that are then in their early 20s, if they, no, YouTube is the past. My parents watch YouTube. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, whatever. What happens to YouTube at that point? What happens to Netflix at that? Oh, Netflix, they never have anything good. I
Right.
subscribe to, you know what I mean? Like, I watch everything I need from my guys on TikTok or whatever
Right.
the app is
Drip
at the time,
Plus, yeah.
right? You know, so if their eyeballs aren't on it,
Right.
what happens to Netflix? What happens to
Or
Hulu Plus?
are their eyeballs rotted from their VR headsets? So the government just beams it right into their brain.
That's happening too. Elon Musk's got that chip. You know what I
Yep.
mean? See that
Right.
does that not as much as I pick on Danny about being a conspiracy theorist, like does that not bother you, scare you a little bit? Going, the same guy that wants to buy Twitter is also developing a mind chip.
Yep. Problem. That's an issue. That's an
Like,
issue. Yep,
is
that's an
that
issue.
does
That's
that
an
not
issue. That's a problem.
the guy that wants to control what I know news network
Yeah,
and just develop a brain chip? Does
yeah,
that is that like
yeah.
that's
Yep.
a little
No, it's a
frightening to
problem.
me?
No, it's a
Like,
problem. I'm scared.
and I'm not a conspiracy nut, but that just
Hey,
sounds
can I tell you
scary to
something?
me.
That's why Danny remains loyal to the foil, baby. You ain't getting nothing in here, baby. Nothing's going in.
Whatever, you just like everybody
People
else will line up.
people tell you to have an open mind because that's how your brain falls out. That's all I'm saying.
They just hey look, they just have to put an eye in front of it. They'll call it the eye brain augmented. Put an
Yeah.
eye in front of it, and people will buy it. Like, and people implant it.
That's why Danny has a Android phone.
You and me both, brother.
Yep.
You and me both. All right, what's our last story?
Well, our last story, we're going to get into it. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our sponsor. Of course, the big man conveniently likes to gloss over the sponsor when it's me.
Yeah. Well,
AvenueLucky.com is my agency that develops websites and provides done for you marketing services, email marketing, ad management. We do it all. Check it out at AvenueLucky.com.